My sister lied that I quit med school, my parents cut me off. Then years later, she came into my ER and I walked in as her doctor. When the security guard handed me my attending physician badge on my first day at Presbyterian Memorial, I remember thinking the laminated plastic felt heavier than it should have. My photo stared back at me from the badge. Dr. Miranda Chen. Emergency medicine. For one strange second, I wondered whether my parents would even recognize the woman in that picture. It had been 6 years since they had seen my face. 6 years since my sister Natalie convinced them I was a fraud, a liar, a medical school dropout spiraling into ruin. I had no idea that in 48 hours, Natalie would be wheeled through my trauma bay doors with her life hanging by a thread thinner than the lies she had spent years weaving. But I am getting ahead of myself. The night everything collapsed started like any other miserable night in medical school. I was hunched over a cadaver in the anatomy lab at Georgetown Medical, my back screaming after 12 straight hours of dissection practice. It was 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had been checking my phone obsessively, waiting for my mother to call me back about Thanksgiving plans. My hands still smelled like formaldehyde, despite 3 rounds of scrubbing, and my eyes burned with the very specific exhaustion that comes from trying to memorize the branching pathways of the brachial plexus while running on 4 hours of sleep. Then my phone buzzed. It was not my mother. It was my father. His text was cold, almost clinical. Your mother and I need space to process your deception. Until you are ready to be honest about your situation, please do not contact us. We love you, but we cannot enable your destructive behavior anymore. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. My pulse started hammering in my temples like a second heartbeat. Deception? Destructive behavior? I was literally elbow deep in a cadaver's thoracic cavity, studying so I could one day save lives. What the hell was he talking about? I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called my mother. Same thing. I texted my younger brother Jason. What is Dad talking about? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, he replied. Nat told them everything. I'm sorry, Mir. They're pretty devastated. My stomach dropped so violently that I had to grip the edge of the stainless steel dissection table to keep myself upright. Everything? What everything? I had not done anything except exist in a state of constant exhaustion, brutal pressure, and crippling student debt. I tried calling Jason. Blocked. I tried my Aunt Susan, my cousin Beth, even my childhood neighbor Mrs. Kowalski, who had known me since I was 7 and had helped me build my first science fair volcano. Every single one of them either blocked me, ignored me, or offered vague, uncomfortable condolences as if I had died, and they were not sure whether they were allowed to mention the body. By 3:00 a.m., I was sitting on the floor of the anatomy lab with my back against the cold tile wall, finally understanding what had happened. Natalie, my golden child sister, the marketing executive with the perfect apartment and the seemingly perfect life, had apparently decided that having a doctor in the family was competition she could not tolerate. I did not sleep that night. I stayed in that lab until the fluorescent lights flickered fully awake around 6:00 a.m. and the morning students started filtering in. I am sure I looked like something that belonged on the dissection table rather than beside it. To understand how thoroughly Natalie dismantled my life, you have to understand her greatest talent. Natalie did not just lie. She performed concern. She weaponized worry. What I pieced together later, through the fragments Jason reluctantly shared, and one guilt-ridden confession from my aunt, was this. 3 months before my parents cut me off, Natalie had gone to them crying, tears streaming down her face, voice shaking. She told them a story designed to hit every one of their deepest fears about me. She said I had dropped out of medical school after my first year. She said I had been lying about my attendance for more than 18 months. She said I was drowning in debt because I had been trying to keep up appearances. She said I was too ashamed, too proud, and too unstable to admit I had failed. So I had been begging her, to keep my secret. She told them I was fragile. She told them I had threatened to hurt myself if she exposed me. She told them she was terrified for my mental health, but could not keep carrying the burden of my lies anymore. Then she showed them proof, screenshots of texts she had fabricated, a bank statement she claimed was mine, showing a negative balance and overdraft fees. A story about a concerned call from a classmate who had supposedly confirmed I had not been seen on campus in months. My parents, bless their terrified hearts, believed every word. Within a week, the financial support stopped. The $1,500 monthly stipend they had been giving me, the money that covered my rent and kept me from having to work full-time during clinical rotations, vanished like smoke. My health insurance, which had been through my father's company family plan, was terminated. Then I received a terse email from my mother, saying they could not, in good conscience, continue enabling my avoidance of reality. I was in the middle of my trauma surgery rotation when my rent bounced. I was 36 hours into a shift, had just helped repair a ruptured spleen, and came home to find an eviction notice taped to my apartment door. Over the next 2 weeks, I called my parents 57 times. Not one call was answered. I sent emails with attachments, my official Georgetown medical enrollment verification, my clinical rotation schedule, signed by Dr. Patricia Vance, Chief of Surgery, my transcript showing a 3.87 gigapascals, my student ID, photos of me in my white coat at the hospital, nothing. Finally, my mother responded once, and only briefly. Natalie warned us, you might do this. She said you have been creating fake documents to hide your shame. Please get help, Miranda. We will be here when you are ready to face the truth. That was when I understood the true genius of Natalie's lie. She had not just told them I had failed. She had inoculated them against every piece of proof that I was succeeding. Every document I sent became, in their minds, another forged paper. Every photo became another staged delusion. Every desperate explanation became further evidence that I was unraveling. I was fighting a ghost version of myself, and that ghost was always one step ahead. After that, I stopped calling. There is a specific kind of death that happens when you realize your own parents would rather believe you are a liar than admit they might be wrong. It is not dramatic. You do not scream. You do not throw things. You just feel something inside your chest go very, very cold, and then very, very quiet. I packed whatever could fit in my 2009 Honda Civic. Everything else, my grandmother's china, my childhood books, my framed college diploma, I left behind in that apartment. The landlord could have it all. Material possessions felt obscene when I could not even afford groceries. The first night I slept in my car was in October. I parked in the hospital employee lot because I figured security would not bother me if they saw my Georgetown medical badge hanging from the rearview mirror. I had stuffed a pillow and a sleeping bag into the back seat, along with a duffel bag of clothes and my laptop. That night, the temperature dropped to 38 degrees. I could see my own breath in the dark. I cried for exactly 14 minutes. I timed it. Then I stopped, because I had to be on the floor at 6:00 a.m. And puffy eyes would invite questions I did not have the strength to answer. I learned to survive in increments. I showered at the hospital gym before my shifts. I ate whatever was left in the physician's lounge after conferences. Cold pizza, stale bagels, the occasional abandoned sandwich. I studied in the medical library until they kicked me out at midnight, then slept in my car until 5:00 a.m., when I would sneak back into the hospital to shower and change. I picked up extra shifts at the university health clinic, drawing blood and running basic labs for $18 an hour. Every dollar went into my tuition fund, because Georgetown Medical, even with generous financial aid, still required nearly $15,000 per semester in fees and supplies that loans did not cover. I sold plasma twice a week. I learned which grocery stores threw out their almost expired food, and at what time. I learned how to ignore hunger until it became background noise. But the worst part was not the physical hardship. The worst part was the holidays. Thanksgiving came, and I spent it alone in the hospital cafeteria, eating a dry turkey sandwich while my classmates posted Instagram photos of their families. Tables crowded with aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, siblings, everyone laughing and toasting and passing plates around. Christmas was worse. The hospital was eerily quiet, and I sat in my car watching families stream past with shopping bags and wrapped presents. It felt like watching a life I had been exiled from, like I was a ghost pressed against glass, unable to make anyone hear me scream that I was still here. I called once on Christmas Eve. My mother answered accidentally, probably thinking I was a spam call. I heard her voice. Hello? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to say? Please believe I exist? Please believe your daughter is not the lie you chose over me? She hung up after 3 seconds of silence. Eventually, I learned to weaponize the abandonment. Every time I wanted to quit, and there were dozens of times I fantasized about walking away from medicine entirely, I thought about the story Natalie had told. In her version, I was weak. I was a quitter. I was someone who crumbled under pressure. So I refused to crumble. I finished my rotations. I scored in the 94th percentile on my Step 2 boards. I matched into a competitive emergency medicine residency at Presbyterian Memorial. I did all of it while sleeping in my car, eating ramen, selling plasma, and carrying the weight of my family's rejection like a stone lodged behind my ribs. When I walked across the stage at graduation, and they called my name, Dr. Miranda Chen, the applause was polite and brief. Every other graduate had a section of the auditorium erupt in cheers. My section was silent, except for a few classmates clapping. I saw the dean glance into the crowd, expecting to see my family. I saw the confusion cross her face when she realized no one was there. I smiled for the photographer anyway. I held my diploma. I did not let them see me break. Residency was its own kind of hell, but at least it came with a paycheck. $58,000 a year sounds like a fortune until you are working 85-hour weeks and realize you are making about $13 an hour. Still, it was enough to rent a studio apartment. A real apartment, with walls and heat, and a bathroom that was not shared with 20 people. It was enough to eat real food. It was enough to stop feeling like I was drowning every single day. I threw myself into emergency medicine with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. I learned to intubate in my sleep. I learned to read EKGs like poetry. I learned the exact amount of lidocaine needed to numb a wound and the precise angle for approaching a central line. I became the resident you wanted on your trauma team. Calm, fast, unflinching. Fear did not live in me anymore. Fear required vulnerability, and I had burned all my vulnerabilities in the parking lot of my old apartment 6 years earlier. I met James in my 3rd year. He was a pediatric nurse in our hospital, and he noticed me one night when I was sitting alone in the break room at 200A, eating vending machine chips and staring at the wall. He sat down without asking and told me about the 8-year-old he had helped place a PICC line on, and how the kid had asked him whether he had ever met Spider-Man because he seemed like someone who would know superheroes. James had this way of talking that made you forget you were tired. He made me laugh. Actual, real laughter. The kind that felt like a muscle I had forgotten how to use. He did not ask about my family for months. When he finally did, I told him the truth. They think I am a failure. They have thought that for years. He looked at me for a long time and then said, "Well, they're idiots then. Because you're the most competent person I've ever met, and I've worked with a lot of doctors." We got married 18 months later, in a small ceremony at the courthouse. It was just us, 2 of my closest friends from residency, Dr. Sarah Kim and Dr. Amir Patel, and James's parents, who welcomed me with the kind of warmth I had forgotten existed. I wore a simple white dress I had found at a consignment shop. James wore his best suit. We exchanged vows in front of a judge who seemed genuinely moved. And afterward, we went to a tiny Italian restaurant, ate pasta, drank wine, and laughed until our faces hurt. I did not send my parents an invitation. I did not even tell them it was happening, but I would be lying if I said I did not imagine it. I imagined my father walking me down the aisle. I imagined my mother crying happy tears. I imagined Natalie standing beside me as my maid of honor. I imagined what it would feel like to have a family there to witness the best day of my life. Then I remembered that they thought I was a dropout who had fabricated an entire medical career, and the fantasy crumbled like ash. James held me that night when I cried, the first time I had truly cried in years. He did not tell me everything would be okay. He did not offer empty platitudes. He just held me and let me grieve the family I had lost. And somehow, that was enough. 6 years after the exile began, I was an attending physician in the emergency department at Presbyterian Memorial. I had my own office, a cramped, windowless room filled with medical journals and a desk buried under paperwork, but it was mine. I had a reputation as the person you wanted running your trauma bay when everything went sideways. I had residents who respected me, nurses who trusted my judgment, and a marriage that felt like the one solid, unshakable thing in my life. I thought I had made peace with the past. I thought I had built a life that did not need my family's validation. Then, on a Tuesday night in November, my phone rang at 11:43 p.m. I was at home, curled on the couch with James, half watching a documentary about ocean life. The call came from an unknown number. I almost did not answer. Unknown numbers at midnight are usually telemarketers, wrong numbers, or bad news. But something made me pick up. Hello? The voice on the other end was frantic, pitched high with terror. Miranda? Miranda, is this you? It took me a second to place it. 6 years of silence had made my mother's voice feel foreign. Mom? Oh, thank God. Thank God. She was crying, the words tumbling out in a breathless rush. It's Natalie. She's at Presbyterian Memorial, they said. They said her heart. Miranda. They said she might not make it. My entire body went cold, not the cold of shock. The cold of a switch flipping. The physician in me took over and pushed everything else into a locked box. What happened? She collapsed at work. They said something about her heart valve. They're doing tests now, but they said she needs surgery. They said I'm on my way. I hung up before she could say anything else. James was already grabbing my coat. Go, he said. I'll meet you there. I drove to the hospital in a fugue state, my hands steady on the wheel, while my mind spun through differential diagnoses. Cardiac valve emergency. 28 years old, sudden collapse. Acute mitral regurgitation. Endocarditis. Ruptured chordae. I did not let myself think about the fact that I was about to see my family for the first time in 6 years. I did not let myself think about Natalie lying in a hospital bed, terrified and fighting for her life. I did not let myself think about anything except the medicine. I parked in the physician lot, badged into the ER entrance, and walked through the double doors. The charge nurse, Carmen Rodriguez, spotted me immediately. Dr. Chen, you're not on schedule tonight. I know. My sister was brought in. Natalie Chen, cardiac emergency. Carmen's eyes widened slightly. She had worked with me for 3 years, and I had never mentioned having a sister. But she recovered quickly. Trauma 3. Dr. Okoye is the attending. Dr. Benjamin Okoye was one of the best cardiologists in the state, a Nigerian immigrant who had trained at Johns Hopkins and had hands steadier than a Swiss watchmaker's. If Natalie had him, she had a fighting chance. I headed toward Trauma 3, my hospital badge swinging against my chest. I could hear the controlled chaos before I even rounded the corner. Monitors beeping. Someone calling for more IV access. The rhythmic hiss of a ventilator. I pushed through the door. The first thing I saw was Natalie. She looked small and pale on the gurney, an endotracheal tube snaking from her mouth, her chest rising and falling with mechanically controlled breaths. Her skin had that grayish-blue tinge that means the body is struggling to oxygenate. Monitors surrounded her like electronic sentries, displaying numbers that told the story of a heart failing in real time. The second thing I saw was my parents. They were pressed against the far wall, trying to stay out of the medical team's way. My father looked as if he had aged 20 years. His hair was completely silver now, and deep lines were carved around his mouth and eyes. My mother clutched his arm, her face a mask of terror. She was watching the medical team with the helpless desperation of someone who had no power and no understanding, someone who could only stand there and pray. Then Dr. Okoye stepped aside to adjust an IV line, and my mother's gaze traveled across the room and landed on me. I watched it happen in stages. First, recognition. Her daughter, the one she had not spoken to in 6 years, standing in the doorway. Second, confusion. What are you doing here? Third, comprehension. As her eyes dropped to the badge clipped to my scrubs, the white coat draped over my arm, and the stethoscope around my neck. Dr. Miranda Chen. Attending, physician, emergency medicine. Her face went through a series of rapid changes. Shock, disbelief, dawning horror. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. My father followed her gaze. I watched his face perform the same gymnastics of realization. His eyes locked on my badge, and I saw the exact moment it clicked. The daughter they thought was a dropout, the daughter they had cut off and abandoned, was standing in the trauma bay, wearing the coat and credentials of an attending physician at one of the state's top hospitals. Dr. Okoye noticed me then. Miranda, I didn't know you were on call. I'm not, I said. She's my sister. The room went very, very quiet. Dr. Okoye recovered first, professionalism snapping back into place. She has acute mitral regurgitation, likely from ruptured chordae tendineae. We're prepping for emergency valve repair. She's stable for now, but it's critical. I nodded, my physician brain cataloging the information. Ruptured chordae, the strings holding the mitral valve in place, had snapped, probably from some underlying weakness or infection. The valve was leaking, blood flowing backward into her lungs instead of forward to her body. Without surgery, she would go into full heart failure within hours. What's her ejection fraction? I asked. 35% and dropping. Bad. Not immediately dead, but circling the drain. My mother found her voice. Miranda. It came out as a broken whisper, my name sounding foreign after 6 years of silence. You're a doctor? I looked at her. Really looked at her. She looked smaller than I remembered. More fragile. The confident woman who had raised me had been replaced by someone haunted. I've been a doctor for 3 years, I said quietly. I've been in medicine for 10. My father made a sound like he had been punched. But Natalie said. I know what Natalie said. My voice was flat, clinical. We can discuss that later. Right now, your daughter needs surgery. Dr. Okoye took Natalie to the operating room. The surgery would take between 4 and 6 hours. They would have to stop her heart, put her on bypass, open the valve, repair or replace the damaged chordae, and then restart everything. It was delicate, high-stakes work, and even with someone as skilled as Okoye, there were no guarantees. My parents followed me to the cardiac surgery waiting room like stunned children. We sat in blue plastic chairs under fluorescent lights, surrounded by other families trapped in their own private hells. And for several minutes, no one spoke. Then my mother broke. I don't understand. How? How is this possible? Natalie showed us. She had proof. She fabricated evidence, I said, my voice still carrying that flat physician tone. Doctored screenshots, fake bank statements, a story designed to hit every fear you had about me. But why? My father looked genuinely lost. Why would she do that? I had spent 6 years thinking about that question. Because she couldn't stand that I was succeeding at something she couldn't do. Because having a doctor in the family shifted the spotlight. Because she has always needed to be the special one, and my career threatened that. My mother's voice was thick with tears. We tried to call you. We tried to help you. No, you didn't. I was not yelling. I was not crying. I was simply stating facts. You blocked me. You ignored every piece of proof I sent you. You chose to believe I was fabricating transcripts and forging documents, rather than consider that Natalie might be lying. She was so convincing. She has always been convincing. That's her gift. I looked at both of them. But do you want to know the worst part? You never asked me directly, not once. You never said, Miranda, tell us your side. You just decided I was lying, and that was that. My father's face crumbled. I'm so sorry, God. Miranda, don't. I held up a hand. Do not apologize because you are scared and guilty. Do not apologize because the truth finally forced its way into a room where it could not be ignored. You had 6 years to apologize. You had 6 years to question the story. You didn't. My mother whispered. We thought we were helping you. We thought tough love would make you face. I was facing things. My voice did not rise. I did not need it to. I was facing 85-hour work weeks while sleeping in my car. I was facing clinical rotations while selling plasma so I could afford textbooks. I was facing board exams while eating vending machine food because I could not afford groceries. I graduated medical school with honors. I matched into a competitive residency. I became an attending physician. I did all of that while you thought I was a failure. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, my mother said, Let us make it right. Please, we'll do anything. I don't know if you can make this right, I said honestly. I've spent 6 years building a life that does not include you. I got married without you there. I achieved every milestone I dreamed about as a kid, and you weren't there to see any of it. You cannot give me those years back. My father looked stricken. You're married? For 2 years. His name is James. He's a pediatric nurse. My voice softened slightly, the physician armor cracking just a little. He's the best person I know. You would have liked him if you had been there. My mother dissolved into sobs. My father just sat there, gray-faced, staring at nothing. 4 hours into the surgery, Natalie's phone, which my mother had been holding, buzzed with a text. My mother glanced at the screen, frowned, and then handed it to me without a word. The message was from someone named Mark. "Hey, did you tell them yet? I know you're scared, but they deserve to know the truth." I looked at my mother. "Who's Mark?" "Her boyfriend. They've been together for a year." I opened Natalie's phone. The passcode was still her birthday, the same as it had been when we were kids. I scrolled through the messages. It did not take long to find what I was looking for. 3 months earlier, there was a text chain between Natalie and Mark. Natalie had written, "I think I'm going to tell them about Miranda. I can't keep lying." Mark had replied, "About time. That's been eating you alive." Natalie wrote back, "I know. I was so jealous, Mark. She was becoming a doctor, and I was barely holding together my marketing job, and I wanted to hurt her. I wanted to be the special one for once." Mark had asked, "And now?" Natalie had replied, "Now I lie awake at night, thinking about her, sleeping in her car, about her graduating alone, about her wedding without any family there. I destroyed her life because I was petty and jealous, and I don't know how to fix it." Mark wrote back, "Start by telling the truth." Natalie responded, "I'm terrified they'll hate me." Mark replied, "They might, but they'll definitely hate you if they find out some other way." I kept reading. More messages. Natalie planning and replanning how to confess. Natalie writing and deleting draft apologies to me. Natalie 3 weeks earlier, typing out a long message to our parents, explaining everything, then deleting it and saying, "I can't do this." I handed the phone to my parents without a word. I watched them read. I watched my mother's face move from confusion to horror to a grief so profound it looked like physical pain. I watched my father age another 10 years in 30 seconds. "She knew," my mother whispered. "She has known for months that she ruined your life, and she didn't." "She couldn't," I said. "She was scared." Fear makes people do terrible things, including staying silent when they should speak. My father looked up at me, his eyes swimming. "How are you not screaming at us right now? How are you so calm?" "Because I learned a long time ago that screaming does not change anything," I said. "And because I'm a physician, I don't get to fall apart when lives are on the line." "Even when it's your sister's life?" my mother asked. "Especially then." I met her eyes. I took an oath. First, do no harm. That oath does not have exceptions for people who have hurt me. If it did, I would not be much of a doctor. Dr. Okoye emerged at 4:47 a.m., still in surgical scrubs, his mask pulled down around his neck. He looked tired but satisfied. "She made it through," he said. "We replaced the damaged chordae and repaired the valve. She'll need close monitoring for the next 48 hours, but barring complications, she should make a full recovery." My mother collapsed into my father's arms, sobbing with relief. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not quite, but something close to relief. Maybe relief that I would not have to carry the weight of Natalie's death on top of everything else. My father asked, "Can we see her?" "She'll be in the cardiac ICU within the hour," Dr. Okoye said. "Family can visit briefly, but she'll be heavily sedated for at least another 6 hours." After Dr. Okoye left, my parents turned to me with identical expressions, hope mixed with fear mixed with desperate longing. "Will you come with us?" my mother asked. "To see her?" I thought about it. I thought about Natalie lying in a hospital bed, tubes and wires keeping her alive. I thought about the last 6 years. The hunger, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the missed milestones. I thought about the messages on her phone, the confessions she had been too afraid to make. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet. I need time." "Time for what?" my father asked. "To figure out if I want to forgive you. If I can forgive you? If forgiveness is even the right word for what needs to happen here." I stood, my knees protesting after hours of sitting. "You made a choice 6 years ago to believe a lie that fit your fears better than the truth that challenged them. I cannot unknow that about you. I cannot unfeel what it was like to be abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally." My mother said desperately, "But we do love you. We never stopped." "Love is not passive," I interrupted. "Love is showing up. Love is believing someone when they tell you who they are. Love is picking up the phone when your daughter calls 57 times, begging you to listen. You did not do any of those things. My father's voice broke. So what do we do now? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe something in between. But it has to be on my terms now, not yours. I am not the desperate 25-year-old sleeping in her car anymore. I am not the one who needs you. You are the ones who need to prove you deserve a place in my life. I picked up my coat and headed toward the door. Miranda, my mother called. I turned back. Her voice was barely audible. Thank you. Thank you for saving her. Even after everything. Thank you. I nodded once. Then I left. 6 months later, Natalie recovered fully. 3 weeks after the surgery, she sent me a letter. A real handwritten letter, 12 pages long, apologizing for everything. She explained her jealousy, her insecurity, her cowardice. She did not make excuses. She did not ask for forgiveness. She just told the truth, finally, and said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. I did not respond for 2 months. Then I sent her a short message. I don't know if we can ever be sisters again, but I'm glad you're alive. She wrote back immediately. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. My parents have been trying too. They sent invitations to Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. They sent cards on my birthday. They asked, carefully and tentatively, if they could meet James. I said no to most of it. I went to one Sunday dinner. I sat at their table, ate my mother's pot roast, and left after an hour. It felt surreal, uncomfortable, and sad. But I went. That was something. James thinks I should give them a real chance. He says everyone deserves grace, that people make mistakes, that families are complicated. He is probably right. He usually is. But I am not ready yet. Maybe I never will be. What I do know is this. I do not need their validation anymore. I am Dr. Miranda Chen, attending physician in emergency medicine, wife to an incredible man, survivor of an exile that should have destroyed me but only made me stronger. I built a life from nothing while they thought I was nothing. I became someone they could not imagine while they imagined I had become no one. That is its own kind of justice. The other night, I was closing out a shift when a young medical student approached me in the hallway. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, her white coat wrinkled. Dr. Chen, she said hesitantly. Can I ask you something? Sure. How do you do it? How do you stay strong when everything feels impossible? When you feel like you're drowning and no one sees you struggling? I looked at her for a long moment. I saw myself at 25, lost, alone, terrified, and determined. You do the next thing, I said, and then the thing after that, and eventually, you look up and realize you survived. And surviving is its own kind of victory. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you. Hey, I said as she turned to leave. You're going to make it. I promise. She smiled. And in that smile, I saw hope. I walked out to the parking lot as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My car was a newer model now, one with actual heat and working windows, parked in the physician lot. I had a home to go to, a husband who loved me, and a career I had earned through blood, tears, and sheer stubborn will. I thought about that girl sleeping in her car 6 years earlier, the one who thought she had lost everything. I wish I could tell her she would be okay, that she would be more than okay, that the people who abandoned her would one day stand in a trauma bay and realize exactly what they had thrown away. But I do not need to tell her. She already knew. That is why she survived. I drove home with the morning light streaming through the windshield, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Peace. Not forgiveness, not quite yet, but peace.